if we can have this is the painting I'm talking about. In the middle you see Jesus. Can you count how many we have in there? How many disciples? Are they 12 or more? I'll help you. They have to be 13, not 12, because Mary is also there in the painting. Anyway, as he was looking for somebody that he was trying to represent Jesus, that's the main character that he started the painting with. He was looking for somebody whom he can use as a model to be Jesus. And of course, Da Vinci was known for his perfectionism. So he was looking for somebody who would express perfect purity and such a serene and wonderful facial expression, and he would say, yes, this is the right man. He has been walking around looking, searching. He went to churches, he went in the marketplace, and finally one day he met a young man who just came down, a shepherd who just came down from the Alps of Lombardy. And the very moment when he saw this young man, he said, "Young man, are you looking for work?" And the man says, yes, I would like something to work. And then Da Vinci said, "Look, I have the perfect work for you." "Oh, what work is that, sir? I know how to do this, and I know to do the other one, and I'm very handy, you know." And Da Vinci said, no. I will give you a huge amount of money just to sit down, and you will be my model, and I will paint you. "Oh, is that all?" "Yeah, that's all you have to do. You come, you sit down in my workshop, and you just don't have to move, of course, and I'll paint you." Done. He started. Remember, Jesus was the first character that he started the painting with, okay? After a few months' time, when he finished painting Jesus in the center, the deal was fine. He paid the man went back. The years went by. And 4 years later, approximately 4 or 5 years later, Da Vinci almost had finished his painting, except one character was missing. Can you guess which one? Judas, of course. It's our topic today. Judas was not in the painting. Now I didn't do a whole very thorough research, but I will tell you in a few seconds which one is my guess. He was going now again into the churches, in the marketplace, looking for a person whom he would think is the best facial expression to portray Judas. And he goes and he looks everywhere, and he couldn't find anywhere a male figure that would match perfectly what he was looking for. Until one day he walks in the marketplace and he just stumbles upon another citizen, and then he stops, he freezes right there. He looks at the facial expression of that man and he says, "Sir, would you like to earn some money?" And the man says, "Well, yes, it depends. What do you have in mind?" And Da Vinci says, "Look, I can give you a good amount of money if you just come and you will just sit and I will paint you." And then the man says, "Hey, I know you. You are the painter whom paid me 4 years ago when I had to portray Jesus." He says, "Hey, is that you?" "Yes, it's me, Pietro Bandinelli, it's my name. I'm the same man. Whom do you want to portray now?" "Last time I was Jesus. Who do you want me to be now?" And Da Vinci said, "Well, this time I want you to be Judas, and I think your face is perfect for that character." What happened? During 4 years only, this man has become, from a pure, noble man, he has become now a great businessman in Milan, in the city of Milan, but his facial expression was, in Da Vinci's mind, was perfect to be the model for Judas. This is a true story. In only 4 years. What happened with this Pietro Bandinelli, which initially he was the perfect, the ideal portrait or model to paint Jesus, 4 years later, his life has changed so much that now he's perfect to be Judas. I identified in Judas' life 5 stages of his fall. Of course, when you sit down and you start studying, you may find 4, you may find 3 or 6. I just found 5 of them, and I will share with you today so you can see how this disciple of Jesus started very well, came to Jesus. He had good intentions, but then something on the way happened with him, just as it happened with Pietro Bandinelli, that initially he was the picture of purity, and then in 4 years' time, what a coincidence, Judas was with Jesus 3.5 years. Pietro Bandinelli, 4 years later, he was perfect to portray Judas. The first one is the choice. The choice, and I have them in a PowerPoint. We can press them and we can have them. The choice, that's the first stage. The choice, or the contact with Jesus, or becoming a disciple of Jesus. Have you ever wondered how come, if Jesus knew the future, how come he called up Judas to be one of his disciples? Or is it that some of the disciples weren't called directly by Jesus? If you open up with me, for instance, in John, let's open up together in John chapter 1, verses 43 and 47, and we can draw the conclusion from here that, from the biblical report, that at least some of the disciples, they were not called directly by Jesus. John 1, 43, 44, it says, Philip, are you all there with me? Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Come and see. Nathanael said to him, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? And Philip said to him, come and see. So you see here, Philip found Nathanael. And then Nathanael came to Jesus. So from this, we can understand that some of the disciples were not called directly by Jesus, at least a small number of them. But Judas, how was he chosen or received to be part of the 12 disciples? Was Jesus personally whom chose Judas, or what happened? Was one of the disciples perhaps who called Judas? Well, look at this. Let us open in Matthew chapter 8. There is a fragment in Matthew chapter 8 where all the scholars, the majority of scholars, including Ellen White, they agree that this paragraph, Matthew 8 verse 19, talks about Judas. Read with me in Matthew 8 verse 19. Then a scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And verse 20, Jesus said to him, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Well, apparently, this is the fragment where the scholars draw the conclusion that the scribe who is actually coming to Jesus and has this dialogue with Jesus is Judas. Judas comes to Jesus. He sees what's happening. He can see Jesus. He can see his face. He can see the miracle he's doing. He can see that this is the Messiah. This is the one who will fulfill all the prophecies. And he sees a great opportunity for him. Think about this. If Jesus is the Messiah, if he's going to be the king, and if I am near him, something will come out for me too. Does it make sense? If he's the Messiah and I'm going to be with him, okay, when the right time will come and he will become a king of Israel, who will be the prime minister? Who? Judas. So with this kind of thoughts, have you ever wondered why a scribe comes to Jesus and says to Jesus, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go"? And what's the answer of Jesus to that? Apparently, the answer of Jesus has nothing to do with what the scribe said to Jesus. Because the answer of Jesus is, let's change the focus. You said, you will follow me wherever I go. Are you sure about that? Because I'm going to tell you something. And he says what? He says this, "Foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests. But the Son of Man," which is me, says Jesus, "has" what? "Nowhere to lay his head." Okay. Jesus, but look at this. When you hear, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." If somebody would come to you and they will say to you, "You are a fantastic Christian. I want to learn from you. I want to follow you everywhere you go." How would you feel about that? Wouldn't you feel a little bit, "Wow, that's fantastic. Somebody noticed me," or, you would feel quite good about it. But Jesus, instead of saying, "Oh, this sounds great. Finally somebody who got it right." No. Could anyone reject such a desire? No, not even Jesus. No. It says this. Jesus could have said to him on the spot, because Jesus knew the future, by the way. Could have said to him on the spot, "You are Judas from Iscariot. Wow, and you dare to come to me." But no, he doesn't do that. The answer of Jesus has apparently nothing to do with the appeal or the enthusiasm of the other disciples regarding, "Accept Judas, please, 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 for us." Why? Judas was most likely the oldest of all the disciples. He was the only one who had high education. He was one who was most respected in the society. And can you picture Peter, just Peter for instance, saying, "Lord, we are all so small and so insignificant. We are all fishermen. We are peasants. At least one of us should be more respected. Please accept him for our sake." I can easily imagine that scene with Peter or others saying, "Do you know this guy, Jesus? This is a scribe. This is an honored and honorable man in Israel." Anyway, Jesus, look at this. Jesus told him plainly, looking him straight into his eyes, "Mr. Scribe, if you want glory, I am not to be followed. I have nothing to offer to you." Can you hear me? I have nothing to offer to you in terms of material possessions. Nothing. If you are coming to follow me for the wrong reasons, watch out. If that is the reason you want to follow me, then you better don't come. That's what Jesus was telling this man. And Jesus sends Judas' minds to a house, to any advantages, material things, positions, and so on. Even these things, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Change your mentality, Judas, because the Son of Man has nothing on this earth. Can you hear me? Nothing. I can offer you nothing of material things. Judas only overcame this first contact with Jesus. Can you think why? Why he overcame this? Even though at the very first dialogue, he felt to go. Why? Because Jesus was so straightforward, and he said to him, "Mister, if you're coming for millions, it's not me. I won't give you any millions." Right? Overcame this because he believed that Jesus was the Messiah, but he didn't like the very first words of Jesus towards him. Jesus was talking to that very enthusiast vision that was in Judas' mind. Jesus will be the King of Israel, an earthly Messiah, the King of tomorrow. And next to him, I, Judas, I will be honored to be your right-hand man. That was what it was in his mind. Now I am in exile, it's true, but tomorrow I will sit on the throne, or whatever, next to the throne. And so it is worth it, all all the suffering now if tomorrow better days will come? Judas chose Jesus and not the other way around. And because Jesus could see the begging in the eyes of the other disciples, as we already said, please, please, please accept him for us, for our sake. That's why Jesus didn't say yes and didn't say no. And he accepted Judas with his silence. Now, Judas thought that he had merits now. Why? He was accepted. He's among the disciples. And he was the only one whom he chose Jesus. And not Jesus chose them. So in his mind, he thought already, I have a very special status among the disciples. Even though it says something interesting in John chapter 15, verse 16, if you can open up with me, in John chapter 15, we will go through quite a number of verses today, because that's how we find out the things when we dig very deep. John 15, verse 16. Are you all there? 16, it says, "You," says Jesus, "did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give you." Okay. Now, when the human being believes that he did it all, it sounds false. Because the human being tries to take all the merits for himself in a selfish way. And this is also what happened with Judas. When he believed that I am special among all these disciples, I'm the most intelligent. You know what? Probably he was the most intelligent. Probably he was the most educated. Probably he was the greatest. But that doesn't mean that he had to look with an air of superiority over the other disciples. Moses and Gideon, two examples. They were doubting that they should be chosen by God. Do you remember what Moses said to God when God called Moses? He said, "Me? Oh, it's not me. You got the wrong person. I can't even speak properly. No, look for another one. I'm not worthy. I'm not apt to the task. It's not me." Gideon the same. Jeremiah says, please don't pick me. I'm just a child. I'm just a teenager. I'm not fit for this job. This is what happens with the people, that they realize, and they are so humble when God calls them, they realize their incapacity, humbleness, and the fact that they do not correspond, at least in their mind, to the divine standard or call. Now, the choice of God is a burden for the selfishness of a human being. Did you get that? The choice of God, when God chooses somebody, we will have a problem. That somebody will have a problem. What is the problem? The selfishness. That's the problem. And the human being can only enter into God's plan and accepting the choice of God by giving up his own selfishness. Is the only way. This time is Judas who chooses, and with a very selfish thought, but keep in mind, very well hidden. None of the disciples anticipated any of this. The only one who knew the heart of Jesus, even at that very moment, was Jesus. That's why Jesus said to him, "The birds of the air, they have nests, but keep in mind, I have nothing to offer," if that's what you're looking for. Now, all this Judas had received. Why? We have to keep this in mind. Because he strongly believed that Jesus was the Messiah. He believed in that. But his faith, Judas' faith, was anchored in his selfishness, the desire to gain. That was the problem. If my faith is anchored in my expectations, and if those expectations are not fulfilled or met, what will happen with my faith? Will collapse. That's what will happen. Now, when the demands of God enter into a conflict with the ego, then our faith is really put to test. And from that point onwards, the genuine faith will appear. From that point onwards. Point number 2, stage number 2 in Judas' fall is this: the crisis. The crisis. That's the point number 2, the crisis. Open up with me, please, in Matthew 14. Matthew 14. We'll stay a lot in Matthew today. Matthew 14, verse 13. Matthew 14, verse 13. Verse 13, it says this. The title is 5,000 fed. Matthew 14, verse 13. Now, when Jesus heard about John, which John? John the Baptist, right? He withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And when the people heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. What was happening there? John the Baptist was in prison. And comes the news that what? John was killed, right? Now, this was a huge shock for the disciples, but let's think for a little bit what was in Judas' mind. Why didn't Jesus release John the Baptist? Why didn't he do it? He could have done it. He had the power. He would have said a word and the prison doors would have been opened. Just like that. Now, Judas would have wanted Jesus to behave differently. He is just too good, this teacher. And he's too good, by the way, with Herod as well and with the Romans as well. You have to be rough and tough if you are the Messiah. You see, Judas, in his mind, he had a certain picture of an earthly king and of an earthly Messiah. That was one of his problems. To release John the Baptist because you have the power. And the next moment that comes after this news, the title is 5,000 fed. So Judas now begins to doubt, are you really the Messiah? Why didn't you release John from prison? You saved his life. And the next moment is one of the greatest miracles that Jesus performed while he was here on earth, the feeding of the 5,000. Now, what do you think it happens in Judas' mind now? Okay, he says, I see, even though Jesus made a mistake, according to Judas' mind, with John the Baptist, he had a weak moment, but still, he just fed 5,000. He has so many gifts. Now is the time for Jesus to become king. Some scholars actually suggest that it was Judas who was the first one of the disciples in suggesting to making Jesus king on the spot, right after this miracle of feeding the 5,000. And it is in John 6:15. Let's open up again. It's a little bit between Matthew and John. They are the best reports on this. John 6, verse 15. John 6, verse 15. It says, are we all there? John 6:15. So, Jesus, perceiving that they were what? Intending to come and take him by force to make him king. You see what's happening? Withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Jesus had just ruined Judas' plans. Did you realize that? Why? It says here, because Jesus, when he perceived that they wanted to take him and put him by force as a king in Israel, in that moment, Jesus said, guys, you all ate, all happy, let's go home. You disciples, keep paddling. I see you later. And he went by himself on the mountain to pray. Jesus foresaw the danger for the plan of salvation. That was not the plan that the Father had with Jesus. That was not the plan for him to become an earthly king. Now, Then comes an episode that we talked about from this, we had a message about this, when the storm from inside of the hearts of the disciples, it's actually, that's the title, is Jesus Walks on the Water. The storm from their hearts meets the storm from outside. Now, who was one of the one who initiated the discussion among the disciples? So this is taking place after the feeding of the 5,000, when the disciples actually thought, with Judas at front, that was the perfect time, the perfect opportunity to put Jesus as a king. And now Jesus is gone, and they are left alone. And what do you think was the spirit what was the mood? What was in their minds? They were probably very upset, disappointed. We had such a chance to put him king and didn't work out. What a shock for Judas, when even though he believed that his vision and his plan was the logical one, and yet did not match God's plan and God's vision. But it is for your own glory, Jesus, and mine too, by the way. I will be your prime minister. Yes, I know, and yet it is not God's plan. You see what's happening sometimes in life? We may have in our mind the idea that this plan, because it's a logical plan, is the best plan for me. Why wouldn't be? But God says, all right, what if it's not for your own benefit or for your own glory or for your own eternal benefit? What if? But you say, but God, please, I want to win at the lottery tomorrow. I'll be the best in Orange. I'll help everybody. Are you sure about that? Is that for God's glory? Well, I didn't think about that. If you put it that way, maybe it's not. I don't know. So this was Judas. It was not God's plan. That was the problem. Jesus wanted for the 12 disciples a different experience. And that experience can be summarized in one word. It is discipleship. That was the experience that Jesus wanted for them. And it was Jesus' purpose. What does it mean, discipleship and disciples? What does it mean, discipleship? What does it mean at the origin? The word, it means to learn and to study. This is what it means. That is the origin of the word. And what does it mean, discipleship? It's a program that you are enrolled in of learning. That was the purpose of Jesus with the 12 disciples. But here we have a problem. Because in order to learn, in Jesus' program, initially you have actually to unlearn. Are you with me? Why? Because when we come to Jesus, we all come with our suitcases in our mind and in our heart. We have suitcases. And we bring our own philosophy and our own ideas to Jesus and we say, Jesus, here I am. You like my suitcases? They are full of stuff. And he knows that. So in order actually for him to start using us for his glory in an unselfish way, we actually have to forget about those suitcases. We have to drop them somewhere in the airport or in the railway station and drop them, forget about them forever. That's the only way that God can actually fill up new suitcases for us with his own mentality and change our mentality. And then he can use us. When Judas came to Jesus, Judas had big suitcases with expectations. And Jesus knew that. Now, look at this. Firstly, it is essential, the unlearning. In order to get right the learning, they had to get the unlearning first. The emptying of the self, of the desires of the ego. Then, when the self has no longer supremacy over you, then you are truly free and you are ready to learn now in the program of Jesus. How does the unlearning become effective? And this is a key point. How does the unlearning becomes effective? Through surrendering of self. That's the most important element. Through surrendering of self. Based on faith and trust in Jesus. When we go to the doctor, do we trust the doctor? Do we? Are you sure? I trust him always. Otherwise, why do I go to him? If you go to the doctor and you have zero trust in the doctor, you will never surrender yourself. He will say to you, now stand up, I want to touch, I want to see, right? That's what the doctors do in order to get a diagnosis, correct? But if you don't trust that doctor, of course you won't let him do anything because you say, I don't trust you, stay at the door. I don't want you anywhere near me, right? Surrendering is surrendering. And that means 100% abandon yourself in the hands of the doctor. In the case of the doctor, and in this case of God. Look this with me. What is the discipline that is being studied in this program of discipleship that Jesus had in mind for the 12 disciples and for us today? There is one only discipline in that school. By the way, that's the best university ever. Only one discipline. Open up with me in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 20. This is the discipline that it is to be studied in the program of discipleship of God. One discipline alone. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 20. It says this. But you did not learn Christ in this way. It doesn't say not through Christ. It doesn't say or from Jesus Christ. No, Paul says here, but you did not learn a person in this way. In other words, the only discipline in this school is Jesus Christ. All we have to do is look at his life and learn and copy, imitate. That's the discipline in this program of God of discipleship. The object of study is Christ himself. Now, there is one more key element between all false religions and the true religion. Key element between false religion and true religion. False religion, they will only say it's all about adoration, it's all about worshiping God. And that's it. End of story. They don't go further. We stop at, we pay a tribute to the gods, and then we go home and life goes on and everything is beautiful. That's the false religion. Now, why is a false religion? Because they say, that's it. It remains in the condition of your selfish human nature and in my terms. In my terms. No change of heart, no transformation included or required. We just pray and we pay tribute to gods. The true religion of the Bible, facing all these false religions, they say the primary purpose of the religion, it's very interesting, is not worshiping alone, is not the benefit of God, for the benefit of God, so that he may get something from us. God did not founded or instituted the relationship with us for himself or for his own benefit, because the Christian religion was founded for our own benefit. Actually, God came down for our own benefit. And the purpose is recovery of the human being, recalibration, restoration of the human being, and being brought back again into God's image as we were in the beginning. That's the whole point of the whole plan of salvation. God created us, Adam and Eve fell, and ever since the tragedy continues. Jesus came with one purpose, to save us and to restore us to the initial status that we had in the image of God, which means unselfish. Now, that's the purpose of God, of creating again this character of altruistic love, caring for the others. One more point here about Judas that it's very, very important. How could Judas think that he was a sinner or bad? He thought in his mind that he was received for his qualities, right? His superiority. And look what's happening. The selfishness gives birth also to a complex of superiority. Selfishness also does another thing. Make us very sensitive at the opinions of others about us. That's how it works. Now, Jesus chose him, and now Judas says to Jesus, I will do something for you. I will act for you and on your behalf. This is actually one of the things that happened when Judas was looking what was happening and his expectations were not met, fulfilled. Then he said, I will do something for you. I will help you. I will help you. And that's why he even chose to be, did you think about that? The treasurer of the group. How did he ended up being the treasurer of the 12? He offered. And Jesus also offered this job to Judas. Why? Why did Jesus do that? Because he gave him the chance to learn unselfishness, to learn to care and to think primarily about the others and their needs. That's why. And Jesus said, I will work in you and for you, Judas, on your behalf. And Jesus found the best spot for Judas in the job as a cashier or a treasurer to learn the unselfish ministry and service for others, to learn how to think of others first and not of himself. Point number 3, stage number 3, the tipping point. Short time in John chapter 6, after the feeding of the 5,000, and after the speech of Jesus, where, let's open up together in John 6. John 6, you are still in John 6? That's where we last time read, John 6. And let's read verse 51. John 6, verse 51. Jesus had a speech at this point in time. And after this speech, 70 disciples, they were the part-time disciples of Jesus, they left Jesus completely after this speech. In verse 51 it says, Jesus says, I am the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread also which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. This is a key point in the ministry of Jesus. And some of them in verse 60, therefore, it says in verse 60, therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, they said, this is a difficult statement. Who can listen to it? This is a key point where for the first time in the walking with Jesus, Judas had the intuition of the nature of the kingdom of God. He understands that Jesus' kingdom is actually a spiritual kingdom and not an earthly kingdom. He had the intuition that does not correspond to his own plans. And then he took the decision to still follow Jesus and the 12 disciples, but to keep his reserves so that when the time will come to detach himself, to unplug, to be able to just walk away. He decided to watch and keep his cool and do not allow himself to become too affectionate to Jesus. And now point number 4, the fall, the point of no return. Let's go back to Matthew 26. Matthew chapter 26. And we will read from verse 6. We will actually read just 2 verses. Matthew chapter 26, verses 6 and 7. Six and 7. Now, when Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster vial of very costly perfume, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. Do you remember this episode? Mary Magdalene comes in uninvited, and she brings a perfume which was a fortune in that time. And that gesture which she did was done in the presence of all the disciples. They were all there, gathered, Judas included. And when she did that, what is happening? Look with me in verse 10, 26 verse 10. But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you bother the woman? For she has done a good deed to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. For when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her." Verse 14. Then one of the 12, and look at this, Matthew points out who was, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me to betray him to you?" And they weighted out 30 pieces of silver to him. What had happened here is the dialogue. First of all, is the gesture of the woman. And here comes one who is absolutely astonished, which is Judas. Why? Because in the moment when she does this, he says, this is a waste. This money should have been given to the poor. And John puts it even more. He says he was saying that because he was a thief and he wanted to use that money for himself. Okay? But Judas is absolutely shocked because this woman shows no reserves to Jesus. By the way, the gesture which she did was only applied for very high authority. Only for a king you would have done that, what she did for Jesus. And a very interesting point is the fact that in that room, that woman was the only one who understood what Jesus was talking about, his crucifixion, that he will die in very few days. Even Judas missed that. Even the disciples missed that point. And furthermore, Judas starts talking against what she did. And when Jesus responds and he says, "Why do you bother the woman? Leave her alone. She did a great thing for me." Now question, when Jesus responded that, how do you think Judas took those words? Did he feel insulted or offended? Because his great intelligence and his great vision, they were not acknowledged. Jesus, you still don't understand me. In his mind, Judas thought that Jesus was narrow-minded and he didn't approve his vision and his thinking. He felt offended, and at this point in time, he decided to betray Jesus. Look at this. One more thing. He has not been with Jesus for 3.5 years for free or for nothing. He was fully convinced, Judas, that he was doing the best thing when he went to the priests to betray Jesus. He had the best intentions. He was thinking, I will help Jesus despite himself. For his own benefit, I must go to the priests. And comes the point number 5, the final choice. So we start in this sequence with a choice, the initial choice, and then again at the end, he has another choice, the final choice. Open up with me in John chapter 13 is a key point where Jesus washes the feet of the disciples. In John chapter 13, and what do you think? Did Jesus wash the feet of Judas? This is a question for you, by the way. Did Jesus wash the feet of Judas? Yes, of course, of all disciples. Now here comes the final struggle in Judas' mind. Because can you imagine Jesus washing his dirty feet? And he's looking, and waves of love flowing from Jesus towards Judas' heart. That is the last attempt of Jesus to redeem Judas. When Jesus washed his feet, Judas was probably very close to give up his own plan and to say, Jesus, I am a fool. But then, again, his own choice, the selfishness that changed his mind. And the same act of Jesus washing the feet of all of the disciples, the same act that so far was touching his heart, now becomes a stumbling block. Why? It can't be that Jesus is a king since he is washing the feet as a servant. He is doing the job of a servant. And if he would be a king, he wouldn't do this. Look at verse 25. And Judas, who was betraying him, said, surely it is not I, Rabbi. Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself. What is happening? Jesus tells them that one of you will betray me. And all the disciples, one by one, they start saying, Lord, isn't it me? I hope not. And who do you think remains the last to ask? Just as in the picture of Da Vinci was very intelligent that he painted Judas, the last one. Why? Because he read the Bible and he saw that the last one who brings up the question to Jesus at the Last Supper is Judas. Because all the disciples asked, Lord, is it me? And Jesus said, no. Lord, is it me? No. And here comes the last one, Judas, who actually, everybody asked the question, but me. I have to ask the question, otherwise I look like I'm really guilty. So he asked the question, surely it is not I, Rabbi. And Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself. The disciples are in shock. They think they didn't get it right. And Jesus explains and makes it even clearer to them all. In John 13, verse 26, Jesus then answered, that is the one. Look at this, how clearly explained in front of all disciples. That is the one for whom I shall dip the morsel and give it to him. So when he had dipped the morsel, he took and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And now, at this point in time, two thoughts are struggling and fighting in Judas' mind. One is the one that he had already. Give up. Don't you see that Jesus knows what you want to do? Just give up. You have been exposed. And the other thought was, so you know, Jesus, what I want to do. It's all good then, because if you know, it means that you agree. And if he doesn't say anything to me directly, it means that you, Jesus, you also want me to do this. And then he says, courage, help Jesus to become a king. Do you see what's happening? The same thoughts that he had when he came to Jesus, wrong thoughts, wrong expectation of earthly glory and power, he has the same thoughts when he's betraying Jesus. He's thinking that he will help Jesus become king. Courage, help Jesus to become a king. It's now or never. And on the way to the high priest, Judas was probably thinking, if Jesus is the Messiah, I will determine him, I will force him, and I will help him set himself free and show his glory. And if he's not the Messiah, then is his business, not mine. And I will still get a minimum gain of 3 years of service. What was that minimum gain? 30 pieces of silver. What was the price? What was the price in those days equivalent of? Was the price of a slave. A price of a slave. That's what he asked, 30 pieces of silver. He was fully convinced that Jesus will not allow himself to be caught, nor mocked, nor even killed, anything like this. Because he spoke clearly all these 3 years about a kingdom. And Judas betrayed Jesus for Jesus' sake, for his own benefit, and for his own success. Judas, even though he lived 2,000 years ago, he is our brother. He is like you and he's like me. We could say he's our contemporary. He could be me or you. Like Judas, we each have a choice to making whether we become a disciple of Jesus or not. Like Judas, there are crisis points. You see all those 5 points? There are crisis points in our walk with Jesus, times when the thought of what the Christian life calls us to do is just too shocking for us. When the demands seem too much, when we realize we would have to deny more of ourselves than we are willing to do. There are times when we want to be a Christian, but we want to be on our own terms. Like Judas, each of us have a tipping point. You see, point number 3, the tipping point. A time when a decision must be made, one way or the other. Unlike Judas, there will come a point of no return. That's point number 4, the fall. The point of no return. Each of us, one way or the other. Sometimes the cost of following Jesus seems more than what we are capable of giving. Surrender. We talked about surrender. Full surrender, absolute and total surrender. What does that mean? Sometimes it means giving up what we want. Sometimes it means being the odd one out, the one who is different, because we answer to a higher authority. Sometimes it means laying down our dearest dreams before we know whether He will give us greater dreams to take their place. It may cost you your job. It may cost you your relationship, your popularity, your friendships, your wealth, your sports. It may cost those things that you hold very dear. But remember this: God's dreams for you are bigger and better than you can imagine. When God looks at His dreams for you, they extend into eternity. Just as Judas had the power to choose, we also have the power to choose. Judas made his decision. I ask you today as well to make a choice. Will you choose to lay your life and your dreams and yourself in front of Jesus and allow Him to be truly the Lord of your life? Will you choose to walk daily with Him no matter the cost? Will you follow Him only with every ounce of your strength so that eternity with Him is yours? What is your choice today? Amen.